Welcome back to another episode of the Bourbon Lens with your host, Jake. Scott is on dad duty tonight, so it is just me, and I'm excited because we are going to be talking luxury American single malt and rye whiskey tonight with Julie Macklowe of the Macklowe Whiskey. So sit back and buckle into the latest episode of the Bourbon Lens. Julie, thank you for spending a little bit of your time in Colorado with us while you're traveling to talk a little bit about, your whiskey, your brand, and everything that you have created. I'm excited because obviously, and you're well aware of all the things that are happening with American Single Malt is a big time, and you are the luxury brand of American Single Malt. So we'll talk about that for sure.
We're the only luxury brand, but it's exciting time. So, I started this journey. So just to give you some background.
Yeah.
I basically started this because I'm a huge lover, connoisseur of all single malt. It was almost in 2018 that I was like hanging out in Isla, Scotland. I was like, oh, I'm drinking some whiskey with Dr. Bill Lumsden and his protege at the time, Brendan McCarran. I was like, this is so crazy. I've been collecting my whole life. I have scotches from 1936 to present day, Irish, Canadian, Japanese, Taiwanese. But I realized in my collection, there's no high-end American-made product. I was like, hey, guys, I have this crazy idea. Like, why don't we go make an American single malt that's like the Ferrari of American single malts? And they're like, we have no idea what you're talking about. There's no such thing as American single malt, but like, sure, we'll help you make it. So I partnered with Brendan McCarran and at the time Ian McMillan out of Glenguy, Deanston, Bunnahabhain, Bladnoch. And I was like, I want to do like the highest quality American single malt. So we started laying down our liquid, which is what's in our signature gold bottle in 2019 in Kentucky in Danville. And well, that tour was laying down. We came at, you remember it was COVID and everything went to hell in a handbag. And we came across about 20 exceptional barrels. And these were actually sourced from Bull Run in Oregon. And at year 7, this is 12-year-old liquid, we brought down from Oregon to Kentucky. And so these casks, there's only like 9 remaining. Never can replicate that liquid ever again. But I'd say those were like our initial $1,500 bottle that gave us probably the halo effect. We actually don't even make money on these. I mean, the casks themselves, because there's so few of them, they cost so much. And then, each bottle may make 200 bottles if we're lucky. Mm-hmm. But this came out of basically Oregon. I'd say it's a heavier liquid, as marzipan in it. It's got a lot of plum, dried fruits. It's got some marmalade in there. It's got much more oil and dark chocolate. I'd say on the palate, lots of fruit cake, licorice. And then when you really taste it, it's got this extremely complex finish to it. It's very layered, very complicated. And that was what sort of put us on the map as like the first luxury American single malt. And this wasn't even liquid that we made, but they're very special casks that we can never get back. Now, through the journey, obviously that bought us a little time. We launched this in like December 2022. So now we're still like, I've already done the packaging and, the design. And part of the reason the bottles are designed like this is when I looked at all of the bottles out there, I was like, oh my God, they were all designed by like dead white guys. Like, let's do something more modern. I want like this idea of like Tom Ford meets jewelry, meets whiskey. And when you see it in the small form, ask. So, finally, then we launched this about 1.5 years ago, which is our main edition. This is only 10 casks together. So it's still like super small. And what's crazy is if you look at these in the glass, and I'm just going to do side by side, is that the 12-year-old liquid in our Kentucky 5-year-old liquid is almost the exact same color, which is sort of nutty, right?
Yeah.
And part of that's because Kentucky, the liquid ages much quicker. And it goes from 100 to 20 degrees, as you know. So they say like a 20-year-old Scotch is like a 6-year-old Kentucky malt.
Yeah.
And this is 100% malted barley. We use all ISC cooperage, 18-month air dried. We blend char 1 and char 3 cooperage together, which are also heavy and medium toast. There's, that's our special recipe. And basically when you smell this, you'll see it's very different than the, I'd say the 12-year-old liquid. To me, it's a much more drinkable whiskey. It's an everyday whiskey. There's honey, vanilla. If you're a bourbon drinker, it's got the nose of a bourbon because you'll see this new American oak, right?
Yeah.
It's got a lot of spiciness because it's 100% malted barley. I think you get some pineapples and some apricots come in there, some spicy orange and ginger for sure. And I think you also get a little clove oil. And then when you're like mid palate, if you add a little water to it, you get some more floral and tropical notes come through, some cake almost and citrus. And then what I love is when you drink it, it really almost punches out like a scotch. And you're like, wait, start like a bourbon, it ends like a scotch. I say it's like a bourbon, a scotch had a baby. And then it's very smooth on that finish.
Mm.
And I think that was like what really differentiates our product is how elevated and how smooth it is on the finish. Now, what I realized because I started selling this 2 years ago, and by the way, American Single Malt just got approved on my birthday, basically 4 months ago. Yay me.
Yeah.
But I realized no one knew what it was. So we also had laid down a bourbon, which we have not released, in a rye. And our rye we intentionally did at the exact same proof, 46%. It's a 95.5 rye because I really want people to understand that it's just a grain change when you go from rye to, malted barley, although it's a very different taste profile. Now, I'm sure you've tried lots of rye and you've got it there. So you'll see what's different about ours is we took up to 4 years, and then we finished our malted barley casks, which I'm pretty sure I'm the first person to ever do that. I thought of it in the shower. I called Brendan McCarran. I was like, hey, I have this crazy idea. I want to take our rye and then I want to finish our malted barley casks. He's like, well, since that very few people even made single malt, he's like, that's a great idea. Let's try it. So, I think when you start on the aroma, you'll see it's the classic honey. It's still new American oak. It's got some white sugar. I think it's got actually white peppercorn, definitely caramel. Some green peppercorns come through. The taste, like most rye, it's spicy. It's got that menthol. It's a round finish. It's definitely got some vanilla in there and the honey notes. It coats your mouth like a golden syrup. I get figs. I think most rye, you get like that jalapeno bite and they die. And what we found is like you actually then get the fruits from the malted barley. So like the pineapple and the apricots start to come through on that finish as you get sort of a leather flavor that also comes through, and a longer finish for a rye that I think you're used to because of that malted barley. It's, I'd say, super unique in the flavor profile. I mean, you drink tons of rye, so you tell me your impression of it. But I think that would be overall sort of what we get commentary wise when people try it.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sipping on the American Single Malt first and foremost, right? Because I feel like that's what you all are known for.
Absolutely.
And you said apricot or pineapple. I got like a flame tangerine. I'm in the same ballpark.
Yeah.
Sometimes
there's definitely honey, orange, ginger, flame tangerine. I love that.
Yeah, that ginger gives you kind of that like tickle on your tongue when you eat it. And so that ginger note's there. And then I like the contrast of like on the palate, it's got the honeys and the vanillas, but then it has this bitterness to it because of that almost orange peel, tangerine peel type deal going on, which I like. I like a little bit of bitterness in my single malt. I think it shows the true validity of the grain and the barrel interacting with one another, especially in the 100% malt. And, I think the finish does give you a lot of that. It almost, the vanilla changes to chocolate, like it's like malty chocolate on the back end. And the citrusy notes kind of fade, but it's that malty chocolate fig
for sure.
It becomes a more complex finish, which is interesting. So that leads me to my question. In Danville, there's a couple people that you could partner with to make whiskey with. Is this column or pot still?
So it goes double distillation through a pot, then into a pot. I'm sorry, column, then into a pot.
Okay.
We make it. So I went to Dr. Pat Heist and Shane Baker.
Yeah.
The only guy who's used yeast, and they'd never done American Single Malt. To this day, I believe they only have made mine.
Yeah.
And by contract, that was true. So, they were really excited about this project they'd never done. As you know, it's much more complicated to make American Single Malt. The yields are way lower. Barley costs a lot more, hence the custom yeast, which gives it so much of the flavor. And we do locally sourced barley. And, I think the craftsmanship of their know-how is what really got me excited about working with them. And Brendan knew them. And that's sort of how this all came to fruition.
Yeah.
And that was, probably like 10 years ago. So 2018, not quite 10, but almost. Feels like decade almost.
Time flies when you're having fun,
and
right?
Yeah. And what's crazy is that, the category just got approved. So everyone's like, oh, this is brand new. I'm like, well, not really. I've been doing it forever. But it is sort of brand new, right? Like it feels like brand new, but it's like when you start making it so long ago, it feels like, wow, there's not more players, but there are now. I think there were 20 people doing this when we started. Now there's, I think, over 100.
Yeah.
Definitely getting more noticed. The category is still so new, though.
For sure. And, I always, hear the debate, like, does it make sense for the big guys to play in it? And does it bring notoriety to the overall category? I think it does. When a Jack Daniels or a Jim Beam, take notice and build out, a portfolio that people can oh, hey, this is what it looks like at scale. Now I need to go find what of my niche that I like in this. I think rising tides raise all ships, right? I think that is very true for American Single Malt.
Totally. And I think just having those big guys in so part because they have the training, the education, they have the people in the bars doing, awareness, teaching the difference between bourbon and American single malt and rye. And I think part of the reason we did the same proof is just so people could understand it.
Yeah.
And that is a big thing. People are like, what is American single malt? I'm like, well, if you like bourbon, it's like bourbon with 100% malted barley. I'm like, or if you drink scotch, it's like scotch made in Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
Those are my really simplified answers, right?
Yeah, for sure. And just to hit a little bit on your backstory before I move into the rye whiskey, I always am interested, right? So you said you've been collecting for a long time and you have a job that, previously where hedge fund managing where you probably need a dram or 10 occasionally.
Oh yeah, it was how I assimilated into the hedge fund business. I ran for Steve Cohen and the Englander, the guys who owned the Mets, and the way I assimilated into that lifestyle is I drink whiskey with the boys and smoke a cigar. And that was how I started drinking whiskey. I was living in Asia and I'd literally they'd work me 24/7 and I'd spend all my dinner allowance at the gift shop and literally hoard little bottles into my studio apartment. Fast forward, I moved to New York City, took my bottles, met my husband, discovered Amex and whiskey auctions, and boom. It's wow, now I have thousands of bottles.
Yeah.
What do I do with these? I was putting them away. And that's really when I realized, oh my God, there's no high-end product.
Yeah.
We got to change that.
No, that's a cool story. And, do you remember that sip that kind of we're okay, whiskey's a thing and I'm going to do it to hang out and be a part of the crowd. Yeah. But what was that sip that was man, this is actually something I really enjoy as an individual? Yeah.
So, I remember my first bottle I drank because I lived in Asia was definitely Macallan. Mm-hmm. It was a Macallan 18.
Yeah.
But, I'm not a huge connoisseur of cherry casks. They're not my personal favorite, a little too sweet for me. Mm-hmm. So I remember it was an Oban. And I was oh, this is a little bit more fruity, a little lighter. I'm actually a whiskey ambassador with 200, a couple thousand registered ambassadors. I can pretty much blind taste everything because I do this for a living. And I sit there and I do blend our samples before we send them to Brendan. And then he and I talk about them. But, I think I also love a peaty whiskey, right? So I do remember my first Lefroy and I remember I bought at Maison du Whiskey. I was fortunate, I was in finance making enough money. I remember buying tropical Ardbeg 1960s and drinking the whole bottle. I'm this, and they weren't even peaty then. Those Ardbegs from the 60s are not peaty. I was wow, this is amazing. So I've been fortunate that because traveled, I was in finance, I got a lot of exposure to a lot of amazing whiskeys and had access to, I'd say, super high-end whiskeys that most people never even get drink.
Oh, for sure. And I think that's the beautiful thing about, traveling, or that random cask finish.
Totally.
And I wasn't a huge...
the truffle oak. I don't know if you remember the truffle oak.
I have
that
not
Dr.
heard of
Bill
that.
did. Glenmorangie Truffle Oak finish. One of my favorites too.
That
I mean, I think that's what's interesting about making whiskey and actually being a connoisseur is that there's so many different variations and so many unique flavor profiles. Why we stuck with new American oak versus using, used oak was we wanted to do it the American way. And to me, that comes from bourbon heritage, which means it's new American oak. Obviously, they just approved the law. You can do either new or used, but we really decide that we want to have like an Americana brand, which meant to keep it down to what we saw as the essence of American rose.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think, there'll be a time where American Single Malt does pick up the secondary cask finish, kind of the portfolio. I think we're new into that.
So we're finishing some in port right now. They're
Exactly.
pretty great.
Yeah. And I think that's what's really fun. And all the like the weird random cask, like the one that kind of like got me over the hump is for the coastal. I wanted in a whiskey, right? Like it doesn't matter if it was American or world, like, and that kind of turned me on to be like, oh, you know what? Maybe that Dalmore is kind of good. Maybe, maybe I need to do this and this and this. And so I appreciate World Whiskey. And then Scott's, who's not on tonight, he kind of got us as, there was a time we joked internally as a podcast group, we need to change our moniker to the single malt lens because we were drinking so much American single malt during the pandemic. It just like all the West Coast players were trying to come East Coast and find the new people. And, we've sat down with probably all the 20 original ones. We've probably sat down with all of them. Now you.
That's nice. One of my favorite pandemic stories, you'll appreciate this. So I bought off an arms dealer, a Springbank 1966.
Oof.
I also got my favorite bottle that I've ever drank, another Springbank Signatory Reserve 1969. And then I got the entire Glenlivet cellar collection. Yeah. Which was, I had certain bottles of it. I think the, 73 truffle, the 73 French oak, and then there's like the 69 were probably two of my favorite bottles, but I got the entire set.
Yeah.
In COVID, which was extraordinary.
Yeah. COVID allowed for a lot of things to exchange hands. Because people were sitting at home and like, I need a little extra money.
Yeah.
Let me sell.
Yeah. I had some, and I got the Bowmore Globus 1973, which 50 were made, and they recalled, I think, every bottle except for two of them because it wasn't filled correctly. Yeah. So COVID was a fun time to be a collector, for sure.
For sure.
Yeah, people are looking for spare cash.
Exactly.
Liquid gold, literally.
Literally. And that's, become a thing. And, I would be remiss if I didn't ask a finance person about all the stuff going on in and around whiskey, right? Like you're going to have a very unique position as a business owner in the liquid perspective, but also from a futures and just kind of seeing the industry as a trend. A lot of people say it's the whiskey glut and, the bourbon boom or whiskey boom is over. My take personally is we're just going to go back to traditional growth markets. You're going to see some people kind of come back to the median a lot of the time. You're going to see 1 to 2%.
So I think that's actually I was just having this conversation yesterday with somebody. I do think there's an overproduction in bourbon.
100%.
Everyone can agree on that. American Single Malt's so new that I can tell you for a fact there's no overproduction because if I want to go buy it in the secondary market, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So that's a new market. I think alcohol consumption overall is down because of Ozempic and GLP-1s, right?
Mm-hmm.
Younger people are not drinking. Obviously, our target market, given our pricing, is somebody probably 30 to 65 and older. I don't know that we're specifically targeting people in their 20s and who are not drinking and, moving more to alternatives like drugs. I think we also saw a huge spike in COVID from people just sitting at home. And to your point, I think it's just normalizing. Yeah. I don't think we're going into this huge down cycle. I think it's just we're seeing the new normal now.
Yeah.
And people are drinking 2 drinks and they're trading up to a premium drink. And, when you're selling a $40 shot, you were never throwing them back. It was always about connoisseuring and, drinking and enjoying and not over consuming, but having the finest quality and really drinking what you like in higher quality. And I think that is the trend of what we're seeing.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think,
You don't need 10 Louis Vuitton handbags. You need two good ones, right?
yeah.
So, I think that is still, people still are going to go out and drink. Um, you know, is everyone going to sit there and do drugs instead? I don't believe that. It's just not where I see things. So,
No, I mean, I agree. I mean, I know at like the last big meeting of something, cannabis cocktails became a big thing, right? I don't know if that is all the rage or not. I mean, people my age, I'm kind of right in your demographic. I'm 35,
yeah.
right? I'm on the early end of that, where I would rather sometimes trade in quantity for quality, right? So my ideal price point for a beverage most of the time, like at my home, if I'm going to purchase, is somewhere between $50 and $100. There's a lot of times I'll spend a little bit more. There's sometimes I'll spend less because I know that,
Yeah.
Heaven Hill produces great quality whiskey. Doesn't matter if it's $20 or if it's, 5,000.
Yeah.
So I'm right there with you. I think people are trading up, they're trying to find the right thing. And I think, they may not go out to bars. I think that's the other thing that
Yeah.
people are understanding is beverage alcohol consumption is down at the, restaurant
They're not
or the
going out
bar.
because it's so expensive. And just
Exactly.
to go to a meal for two people now is like $250. And like, how many times are you going to do that a week? Like, so you're
Not
staying
often.
home a little bit. I'm just saying, it's like the restaurant pricing has become extraordinarily high. So I think that is also some of what's going on here. And you can't underestimate the fact that, like, oh, I'm going to sit home, I'm going to drink my own bottle and drink my own whiskey. And look, part of the reason we came out with our $100 bottle here, which you can get on the Macklowe.com, is that we want to have a more affordable option.
Yeah.
Now, is this your well liquor at $30? No. It's still a connoisseur's liquid. We're still only batching 10 casks together. It's still like all hand selected. So, our goal was never to be a mass brand, right?
Yeah.
That's not my personal goal.
For
we
sure.
want to be like Louis Vuitton or Dom Perignon, right?
Yeah. Well, and speaking of, you picked up the silver bottle and I've been drinking this. I agree with you. The caramel red fruit vanilla fig is the kind of the note I get on the nose,
Yeah.
but the multi-barrel thing is giving me some peated vibes, that little bit of smoke, a little bit of it's almost like pit smoke. I would say more barbecue-y than it is like.
Yeah, it's not like a peated whiskey smoke though. I think I'm careful when I use that because when I hear smoke, I think of Lafroig or Lagavulin.
Yeah.
I think it's almost like a spiciness that comes through.
It does.
Right.
And then it's balanced with that tropical. So like I think of like carnitas, right? Where it's that pineapple smoke kind of deal thing that you have going on. And so I think that makes it really uniquely American, right?
Yes.
And I think that's a really interesting kind of, I don't know, it's just playing on my tongue. And I just like, I don't know what to do with it because it's unique and different.
It's different, super different. And look, that was sort of my view is like, look, Beyonce came out with her 51% rye, 49% malted barley. I think ours is better because we actually took the rye and then finished it in malted barley.
Yeah.
But the whole idea was to have something that was not on the market.
Yeah. Well, I could say a lot of things about the first thing. I'm going to leave it at that. There's a reason why there's a full bottle behind me on the left.
I know.
Shoulder.
I hear you. I tried it side by side.
But yeah, I think this is unique. I think the Scotch drinker trying to get into American whiskey as a whole, maybe you don't want single malt because, it may be too harsh because of the new barrel. This would be another entry point for them. I do love an Isla cask finished whiskey. I think Barrel Bourbon did that really well. This gives me that vibes. And I think you could really, you could sit down across from an Englishman or Scotsman and say, here, try this. And they'd be like, they would get tripped up a little bit on what it actually is.
Yeah. It's funny. A lot of people are like, is that Speyside? Like if I didn't tell them, they wouldn't know.
Yeah. It does. It does have Scotchy vibes to it, which
it has Scotchy vibes. And that was like the idea is like, and also like, it's a reason that our product's around the 5 to 6 year mark and we'll have single releases that come out older, but we don't want to get too woody. Mm-hmm. We want to be drinkable and, approachable too.
Yeah. No, And it's so weird how vanilla forward it is on the nose and palate, and how
well, that's because we use char one.
Yeah, and then it fades to that chocolate, like that malty chocolate. I feel like I'm sitting at an ice cream shop and I got a chocolate malt, right? And I didn't get chocolate milkshake, I got a chocolate malt. And that's a very specific thing. Kids these days probably don't know because they've never got a malt.
No, I don't even know what that is.
And like that mix it with that oak bitterness, like it just works. It works really well.
No, I think, look, I feel blessed that people love the product. I'm so glad you do. We're in all the top restaurants, John George, Danielle. I'm here in Aspen at tons of restaurants, Catch. So we're like doing great. We're in fun places like Princess Cruises, and what's fun about this is the journey and meeting all these awesome people. Total Wine carries our product now. I believe Reserve Bar has it. So, it's been a fun journey for sure.
Yeah.
Of like meeting interesting people, some of the best bartenders in the world, some awesome mixologists. It's been like fun to do.
Yeah, for sure. And, I know you showed the bottle earlier and I'm going to show it again as well, but, it could pass as a giant ass bottle of perfume.
Yes, but when you see it in the small format, you really do you're like, wow, that could be like a perfume.
And big fan of screw tops, right? Like, say what you want. Screw tops are the
whiskeys. Everyone's like, why don't you have a cork? I'm like, because it lasts much longer if you put a screw top on it.
Yeah, and it ain't gonna have cork taint. Like, I can literally set this and
you don't get bad bottles with screws. I was so upset. I had a Bowmore 1988 hand fill bottle. I remember opening it; the whole bottle was skunked. I was like, oh,
yeah,
so annoyed.
Yeah,
so that doesn't happen with screw tops
for sure. I went and picked up my aunt-in-law. I don't know, my wife's aunt's. She had a very old Fitzgerald. Come to find out, I looked at the laser code, or not laser code. I looked at the back of the bottle. It was Stitzel. Old Fitzgerald, and the cork had evaporated into the bottle. And I was just like, can I salvage this? And so I'm sitting there with a strainer.
Trust me, I've done the same thing. The strainer, the decanter, trust me, I've done it all.
Yeah. And it didn't save it.
No,
it was sad. They were like, you said I could sell this for X amount of, if the cork didn't, you have to every now and again, with a cork, you have to shake the bottle. You have to keep that thing wet. People don't tell you whiskey 101 when it comes to making sure that, your bottles don't mess up.
Yeah. And then you have to put the argon spray in it to make sure to preserve it. It's a whole thing.
It is.
And that changes the taste sometimes. Yeah.
So, for you, what's next, right? So you talked a little bit about, you laid down some bourbon. You've obviously,
so we're launching a blue bottle, which you'll love. It's like royal blue. They'll come out sort of late this year, early next year. I don't know until I know. And then we have a red bottle to have a full line.
Yeah.
We're really focused on 3 of our SKUs will be American Single Malt. And then I do think you need to have the bourbon and rye just to really round out the line so people can understand.
Mm-hmm. No, I think it'll be fun to see you all expand and grow as your stuff comes of age, right? And
our bourbon's about 6 years, so that's probably the point where we'll start to release.
That's the Steve Nally rule: 6 years or older. I mean, he laid down a few. I didn't feel
comfortable doing it before then.
He laid down a few bottles, at Megan's Mark over time.
So I think that's the right rule, though.
Yeah, I would agree. It's
a little too hot before then.
I don't mind 4-year bourbon, for a thing, if it's bottled in bond, be 100 proof. But if you're going to do something where you're trying to get unique flavors and roundedness.
Yeah, we're working on some cool finishes. It'll be fun. You'll be excited when we launch it, I hope.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. I mean, it's never a dull moment in the whiskey industry. You never know who you're going to meet. You never know what you're going to talk about.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that you kind of went all in on American Single Malt. And I think
we
that's
really
cool.
have. And I think it's unique. I think it's fun. And that's my passion. So as a malt drinker, and that's my go-to, it just felt really authentic to me and who I am.
Yep.
And then the idea between the rye and the bourbon was just more almost educational purposes.
For sure.
Like, so people really understand the malt.
Yeah. No, I think it's great. I think if you are in the kind of mood to spend a little bit of more money, right? We kind of can both agree on that. Then I would give this a try. Like I would, you have my full recommendation. If you're willing to spend $100, which for a lot of whiskeys, you can get a Macallan. Can't even get a Macallan 15 for that. You can get a premium, I believe, whiskey. I think you could confuse a lot of people in both of these categories. And so, good job for you and your team. Don't always say that.
Appreciate it.
So I really am grateful that you sent us a bottle of each of these.
Absolutely.
And, we're able to connect so quickly and get this together. For the people, I'm looking at the website, it's themacklowe.com, and that's MACKLOWE.com. You can go pick up these bottles. And if you spend $150 or more, you can use the code MACSHIP and get free shipping. So that's a beautiful thing. Look, I'm advertising for you.
I love it. Thank you.
And Julie, we just want to say thank you again for joining this episode of the Bourbon Lens. And
thank you for having me on. Have a great evening. And, cheers.
Cheers. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Bourbon Lens. Make sure you're connected with Scott and I via social media on Instagram, X, and Facebook. We'd love to connect. And if you're more the professional type, follow us over on LinkedIn. If you want to know more about Bourbon Lens, make sure you're subscribed to our weekly newsletter, The Weekly Pour. For exclusive content and more, check out Patreon. Follow us there at Bourbon Lens. And last but not least, on your favorite podcast listening app, make sure you're subscribed because every Monday, Scott and I release a podcast, and we would love to have you here listening to the newest features and the newest whiskey news. And until next time, cheers.